Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we preview the Detroit Lions Week 16 matchup against the Chicago Bears. We'll talk about what to expect out of this game, including some possible adjustments, as well as potential implications, win or lose. We'll also wrap up some thoughts from last game and hit on any major storylines, that and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Corey Schlesinger, and you are listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, a former Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's the current scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, good to have you here.
Oh, great to be here. A little full, though. I just finished up eating some ramen noodles and some molded bread.
No joke, no joke. My daughter's had ramen noodles for dinner tonight, Coach. So we left the molded bread out, but I hear you on the ramen part. I can't wait to get into that. And getting into that will be James Cook with us. If you were able to see the video, which we don't have, he's holding up some ramen right now. James Cook is the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. You can hear him on the Get Around podcast as well. That does tend to drop on Mondays, James. Good to have you and your ramen here.
Good to be here. Shrimp ramen for the win.
There you go. Winner, winner, lobster dinner, or shrimp dinner in this case. All right, let's start off with some final thoughts from the last game. The Lions lost just the second time this season. Like I said last show, the Bills lost to a 7-6 team the week before they played the Lions. We just lost to a 10-3 team. And I said, the loss didn't concern me. It was the injuries, the extra injuries. But Campbell even talked about how, the loss isn't the worst thing in the world. It is because you're chasing that number one seed. But Coach, I don't care how competitive a game is. When you keep winning the game, you forget what it feels like to lose, right? I mean, and that feeling of loss, I think, goes back to that molded bread you're talking about, and that's what makes you hungry for more.
No, there's no doubt. I mean, you can't. It's so hard when they keep stacking up and stacking up and stacking up, and then you start really believing everything you're hearing and seeing and go, nobody can play with us. But I think we let our guard down a little bit. Coach Campbell had a thing about hanging onto the rope, climbing to the top, and we may have let our grip go a little bit on that. He talked about that earlier in the year. So, but again, these are things that bring you back around and get you focused for the task at hand.
For sure. And James, you wanted to add a couple things about the injuries and talk about, the Lions coming back to task here.
Yeah, I put together a spreadsheet of injuries around the NFL. Players who were on the injured list as of, I think it was Monday, around the league. So players who had already been activated didn't count. So there's 317 players around the league who are currently on injured reserve, or as of Monday. So that's almost 10 a team. The Lions have 21. 22 if you're going to count Montgomery, which I think most of us are leaning towards he's probably not going to play again this season and going to end up on injured reserve. The interesting thing, though, is that the split between offensive players and defensive players on injured reserve is almost exactly the same. There's 11 of those 317 are special teams players, kickers, punters, and long snappers. Like just special teams only. So if you split it down between offensive and defensive, it's 154 offense and 153 defense.
Yeah.
Which makes the Lions split of 16 of their 21 even more crazy. And then I kind of broke it down too into which teams play on turf or not. The team with the fewest players on injured reserve is the Buffalo Bills, who only have 2 after they brought a tackle off of injured reserve on Monday. And they play on turf.
Yeah. So there's not necessarily a correlation between turf and grass is what you're saying.
I'm not sure if it's as hard as a lot of people think. I think that there definitely can be a thing, maybe if you break it down to like knee injuries and ankle injuries and that kind of stuff. Because I mean, about half of the Lions' injuries, I don't think can be applicable to the turf at all. You know, broken legs and broken arms and broken
Right.
jaws. Those the turf doesn't play into that at all. So you'd have to break it down a lot more than I did, than I had time to do. But just basically just doing that, it was pretty interesting. I mean, of the 12 teams that have 10 players or less on injured reserve, six of them play on turf, six play on grass. So I mean, it's pretty interesting. And Cleveland's the next closest team that has the most players on injured reserve with 16, 10 of those on defense, and they play on grass.
There you go. Well, yeah, Coach, what do you want to add to
Did you
this?
guys like the thing I sent you? I think just before you guys were both going to your meetings or your parties or whatever, where it had the Lions are at 21 and the and and the Bill was it the Eagles, the Packers, and the Vikings maybe? They only have 19 combined.
Yeah, I think there's another similar one going out there where the rest of the NFC North has fewer than the Lions
Yeah, yeah.
combined. So yeah, I was going to ask you, Jerry, about this. I mean, when you were coaching at Glen Lake, you guys went from grass to turf. Did you
Mhm.
notice any difference?
I did not know. I mean, the thing that was one of the biggest things we did. You know, we all want grass, but if you don't have somebody that's going to work on it 24/7, you can't keep it, you can't keep it so it's perfect and so that it's not slippery so you don't have bad spots so you don't lose grass and so we our biggest thing was we went through and found the safest turf and found the one that had the least amount of injuries on it. I mean, I think the one last year, the Super Bowl last year, was it everybody was slipping around, or one of the big games last year. Do you guys remember that? And they
Yeah.
had to go change their cleats, for a turf field. So, I mean, it's half, it is what it is. Like even McNeil's injury the other night, you guys, that he jumped and got pushed when he was in the air, and the next thing you know, his foot comes down goofy. So yeah, it's just crazy, but injuries are part of the game.
They are. And, we also know the Lions upgraded their turf ahead of schedule because they wanted to get the best turf for the players after they got, information from them and whatnot. So they put some investments in. I'm just calling this some bad luck and some unfortunate circumstance. And we got to go with that next guy up thing. And, Coach Campbell said, if you guys go back to his press conference after the NFC Championship game last year, what did he say? It's going to be harder to make it back here. And he was not wrong. But here's the thing. Because he was aware and he knew it, he has prepared these guys for this moment. The whole offseason, the whole season has prepared them for it. And, no more accolades, right? And James, Coach is the first one. Before we even went on the air, our last show, he's like, I'm done with the accolades. Coach is in game mode right now. It's season mode. And he doesn't want the fan celebration stuff because he believes in the focus. And so, Coach Campbell doesn't want the accolades. He's like, you know what? Some people are starting to count him out, saying, it's out because your defense is too banged up. Well, good. Because, what? They don't need to hear how good we are, and other teams don't. And so it might not have been the worst thing in the world to get that loss against Buffalo. And here's Coach Campbell talking about that right now.
Well, what's interesting is there's two things that unfold. Really, it's one, it's the loss, right? When you haven't lost since September. So there's the loss element, and then there's the injury element. And so everything gets compacted. And so you really need to address both. And that's what we did. And, one is, hey, we mentioned it, so we got popped in the mouth. And, and we got to get up off the ground, and we got to go back to work and reposition ourselves to be able to play the next game and learn from what just happened. And the other is to not lose confidence in the fact that we still have really good players here on defense, and that we have good coaches, and that we can play any way we need to play from that standpoint, but as well as offense and special teams to still win games. And so that's what's important. And really, you just got to stay focused on what's in front of you. I mean, it really is. Just worry about today and worry about today's practice.
So, Coach, I'm going to start with you on this one. From that perspective, you heard Coach Campbell, what he said, and we talked about this briefly earlier. You know, when you lose, it changes things. It goes back to that molded bread. In the long run, is this a good thing potentially for the Lions?
There's no doubt in my mind. I was talking to Duke about it. I was talking to Reese Hazelton and those guys about it. Both those 2 years that we went to the state finals, we had losses that we should have never had. You know, we lost to Frankfurt in 16 there, and then we got pounded by Kingsley. You know, it was one of those games. In that game, everything that could go wrong went wrong. Our best D tackle got hurt, and Kingsley took advantage of it, just like the Lions. And you know, I think they put 56 on us, you guys. And I remember that in both those games. You know, came back to my staff. I was upset about the loss, but you know, kind of say to the kids, that's kind of karma. You got to stay focused and things like that. And what happened? You know, we went on a run and made it to the finals. So it's just good things. It regrounds you, regroups you. You know, creates a crisis. Lou Holtz used to say that, when it create a crisis. Well, we have one.
I was running until I wasn't. My hospital stay would have cost nearly $48,000, even with insurance. But with VA, I'll pay zero. And VA is the best, most affordable healthcare in America for veterans like me. Knowing that my family is waiting at home and a surprise medical bill isn't, that's good for my heart. My service was then, my benefits are now. Get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov.
Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.
Right, and they know, you know what, Campbell's last lines were one game at a time. That wasn't his line. It was focus on what's in front of you. James, that's Coach's mantra, one game at a time. Well, we got 3 weeks, and he's like, we're focused on Chicago right now. And so it helps bring things back to perspective. Yeah, the margin for error is slimmer, James, but they're still in the lead here. So, you know, I feel like Coach Campbell has really taken control of the message, and you heard him on 97.1 The Ticket delivering part of that message. And so how does that message resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, we talked not too long ago about how a loss at this point in the season could refocus the team. And like Jerry's talked about, reading your press clippings, all that kind of stuff. And when you saw in the Bills game was when the Lions got down, even when they started coming back, when they started scoring touchdowns, they weren't celebrating. They weren't celebrating first downs. They weren't having guys, you know, doing the pointing after a first down. There wasn't like big orchestrated celebrations after the touchdowns. There was some celebrating because, I mean, how much does Tim Patrick get to score normally, and Skipper scoring his first touchdown, all that kind of stuff. But you even saw Jamison Williams when he scored his touchdown. He pulled a Barry Sanders and he just walked over and handed the ball to the ref and walked back to the sideline. So they got pretty workmanlike after they got that deficit. I think you're going to see that same kind of focus here for the rest of the season.
I think you're right on that. And here we are facing the Chicago Bears. The Bears are looking for something in this, and they might not even know what they're looking for, probably a win. But there's a few things to remember here. A year ago, we played the Bears and pulled a game out of our rear end to win at home. We went on the road, thought we would take care of Chicago easily, and we lost. So that's got to be in your mind. The other thing is, we played the Bears at home this year, and there was a debacle on the Bears side of the ball at the end of the game that helped the Lions pull this one out too. Now, Coach, the Chicago Bears have a different coach right now than the last time we played them. And so, you know, the offensive coordinator is taking over the head coaching position. Anything different that we might expect from the Bears in this game? There's only like 2 games of film, right, to look at for this. But are we expecting many changes from the plan of attack from before, you think, from the Bears?
No, I mean, I found, you know, a few changes that, you know, defensively we'll talk about that and very minor defensive on their coverage concepts. You know, but the same thing is I kind of went back and looked at those two. Even Coach Campbell said today it's hard to get tendencies in 2 games. So he went back and looked at everything. So you got to remember you had a guy who became an offensive coordinator. Then I think it was the next week he became the head coach. And then it's just that's what a change for him. He's trying to show some things. So I don't see when you look at the season, I went back and I look back between this game, the first time we played them, their last game when we played them, and stuff like that. There's not a lot of changes. Some of their numbers have gone, and some of their numbers have fallen, on their tendencies and things like that, or their production. But so I don't really see anything from there, from that standpoint. If you want to talk, we'll talk about stats in a second.
Okay, James, what are you expecting to see out of the Chicago Bears offense?
Well, last time we played him, Caleb Williams was actually pretty decent. I mean, aside from completion percentage, I would say he almost outplayed Jared Goff in that game. Part of that's due to the game scenario and that the Lions were running the ball, just running the ball down Chicago's throat. So they didn't need Jared Goff to have a huge game like he had last week against the Bills. But still, Caleb Williams had a pretty good game. I mean, he threw for 3 touchdowns, no picks. And since then, even he's had found a much better rapport with Roma Dunze, who in the first game against the Lions, he only had 2 catches. So that's one more threat on their offense. Their weakness is still the offensive line. So hopefully the Lions can generate a lot more pressure than they did against Buffalo, especially with Levi and Pascal both having kind of a game under their belt since coming back from injury. So neither one of them looked overly impressive last week, but I think Josh Allen played a pretty good part in that too, of them not being able to get consistent pressure or get sacks or get home or anything. Whereas as the Bears have been a pretty porous offensive line this season. I mean, we saw the body language last week from Caleb Williams when he was sitting on the bench and just kind of rolling around in pain on the bench and nobody paying attention to him.
That's a good
For
sign.
sure.
Good
Good sign for us. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Coach, if you look at the running game for Chicago, DeAndre Swift has only eclipsed the century mark one time this season. His average is down to 3.9. Now, we do know he can be a weapon in the passing game for them and whatnot, but what are you expecting out of the Chicago offense as they go up against this Detroit team?
Well, some of the things I think we're going to focus on, which is going to limit. So a couple things off the offense is really weird. I was looking at the Bears running backs have struggled to gain extra yards on the ground, averaging the fewest yards after contact, 2.7. So I think that's one of the big things. The other thing, the Chicago Bears have used 13 different unique offensive line combinations this season, tied for the second most in the NFL. I think we were that way last year, were we not, for about 11, 12 games? So I think those all, 11 different, but they have 11 different offensive linemen that have played 50 snaps. Okay. Some of the numbers, let's talk about the passing thing. James alluded to some of that. They've allowed 58 sacks, which is tied for first. They have 402 sack yards, most, and they're possibly down 2 starters.
And that's big because every time we sack them, which we haven't done much of recently, it puts the other team behind the sticks a little bit, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we, get them off schedule where we can put pressure. Now, under pressure, so we'll go to his passing game off that concept. Under pressure for the season, and again, I checked the season. I checked our last time we played him. Checked him last. It stayed pretty much the same. He's at 41.7 when he's under pressure, pass completions. Against us, he was 44.44 when he was under pressure. A lot of those deep balls that we got last time we played him, he wasn't under pressure, or he had moved the pocket a little bit. Okay, deep balls, he's only thrown, that's at plus 20, you guys. That's air yards.
Yep.
His average on the season is 12.6. Well, against us, James already alluded to this. Against us, this year in the previous game, he was at 17.9. So 5.3 increase, which is a lot in one game.
So does that mean he's taken more deep shots against us than he has against other teams?
Yes. He took 5.3%, and that kind of broke down even more against us, which I think because of the man coverage. So,
Yeah.
we may change some things up on that, which, that's a tough one to throw to. The medium routes, which is your 10 to 19, 10 to 19 yards, he was at 17.2 on the season. Against us, he was at 28.2.
Now, Coach, is that an area that the linebackers tend to cover, the 10 to 19 range?
Yes. Unless we run cover twos and we leave our corners down and stuff. So those are huge stats. Now let's go back to his deep balls against us. He was 6 for 18 for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that's the ones that James was talking about. 6 for 18, he was 33% on the deep ball. So I got to believe he's going to come back, especially because he feels he had success. But you got to remember, our defense gives up the most passing yards of anybody, right? But we don't give up the most touchdowns on the long balls. That's where our red zone defense comes in. So kind of that all plays into our defense. Even if we're down some bodies, it still plays into our defense. If he's going to take the deep shots, we do a great job of making sure we don't give up a splash play, a touchdown splash play. We tackle them, bend, don't break, rally the troops, red zone, make them kick 3. And so I think those are all going to play. That the medium one's going to make you a little nervous, and they're going to look at what they're watching last week's game, so they're going to try to bring the back out of the backfield. Swift's a pretty good pass catcher, and so, but I'm not. I think Glenn. I think we're going to be a lot. I think we'll be a lot better. You guys, there were so many mistakes in that last game. Oh my God.
Well, I think that's the other thing too, Coach, is it wasn't that we didn't have the talent. It was that mistakes were made. And I think that's what Coach Campbell alluded to as well. That's something we've talked about in the last couple of shows, even the Packers game. And Coach Campbell even said it. There's just one thing here, one thing there. So let's talk about that secondary on the Lions defense for a minute, Coach, because you talked about, Caleb Williams wanting to take some deep shots. Carlton Davis is out. So Terry and Arnold's going to be the number 1 DB. That's got some concern for some people, but he's a number 1 pick for the Lions, and he's got 15 games under his belt or 14 games under his belt this season. So he's no longer the September rookie. And we don't know who's going to start across from him. Will it be Mosley? Will it be Vildor? I have a feeling it's going to be Vildor because he's there. He's taken the reps. He's been in it. And correct me if I'm wrong, James, but didn't Vildor actually play a ton, if not all of the game against Chicago last time?
Yeah, he did play. Again, this is a revenge game for him because Chicago's the team that gave up on him. They drafted him in the, 4th, 5th round, and they gave up on him pretty quick. And then the Lions claimed him off of waivers and have used him since. He was one of those street free agents that they signed last year when they had so many injuries on defense. So it's a bit of a revenge game for him, and he's played pretty well. I mean, a lot of people have just wanted to blame everything on the defense on Kindle Vildor the last 2 weeks, and I've just been like, actually, no, he's been pretty solid. It's been the linebackers. What did he allowed 1 catch for 7 yards last week, wasn't it, Jerry? I mean, the week before it was only a couple of catches that he allowed, and he's played quite a few snaps. So I'm not really necessarily worried about the secondary nearly as much. You've got Mosley coming back. You hope this week that adds another good body there with a lot of starting experience. You hope you get Rakestraw back maybe next week. And I'm not worried about the secondary at all unless they get more injuries like the other positions on defense have. So the secondary is in pretty decent position. You could even see Amik Robertson being moved outside. He played outside quite a bit when he was with Oakland. The Lions have pretty much used him exclusively as a nickel guy, but with Oakland, he spent about half the time, I think it was, outside.
I like hearing you say that you have confidence in the secondary, because I feel the same way. Obviously, we've lost our top guy in Kindle Vildor, or not in Kindle Vildor, and CD3, Carlton Davis, but we've got a solid group. Branch and I'm blanking. Kirby Joseph, right? At the safety position, with Amik Robertson, whether he's inside or outside, we have so much more depth than we had a year ago at that position because everyone's like, hey, this team's releasing somebody. Let's go get him. Well, you guys already brought up Rakestraw. We have a lot more depth. Emmanuel Mosley. We don't know what we're going to have out of that guy. And I know he's been injured a couple of times and had very little playing time with us, like 2 snaps or whatever, but there's potential there. And Coach, you got to like what you see in the room. And Coach Campbell even said, we're going to put the best 11 guys on the field to make us win. But I also think that our secondary being so much stronger this year, I do think it's that much stronger this year than a year ago, is going to carry us further the rest of this season. What are you seeing?
Oh, I totally agree with you guys on that one. And Arnold, Arnold's one of those guys. If he's going to get beat deep for a touchdown, he's pulling you down, dude. He's going to take the PI. and you know what? That's the aggressive. And we get the report from the officials. We'll let you know how good it's going to be. But here's the other thing too. Who started his 21 day this week? Iffy. Iffy's a guy that can come down and play that nickel. Robertson go outside. Iffy, how many sacks and pressures did he have last year coming off? Or you leave him back because him and Joseph have played together. They're boys. And then you bring Branch down into the box. I mean, we're a lot better than we were last year. Linebacking core. So.
And Coach, they started his window, but there's a chance you could actually play as quickly as this Sunday. And remember last year how we had a lot of sub packages late in the season? You might see some variety of mixes in that secondary.
Oh, for sure. Try to confuse the rookie. He's got some veteran receivers and stuff out there, but we got to get him confused. And I think that's what you're going to see. I think, if knock on wood, Trevor's trending right, then we got him back. If you get Iffy in there, Mosley, I think Mosley, they're just baby stepping him because they don't want him to come back and have another setback. Poor guy. And this could be his breakout game for us, or at least get 10 reps, get 10 snaps, get 15, whatever, and so I feel comfortable with it. I think Vildor's going to feel more comfortable because back to that, James, he had 49 reps last game against the Bills, right? And I think he had 38 the game before that. So Vildor's he's in playing mode right now and not where he's got to be the best pressure. You don't have to cover the best guy. So.
Yeah. And, he's had the whole year in the system as well. He didn't come in late like last year. And yeah, there were some times he got beat last year, but from the beginning of the offseason, if not all of us, and I know at least I did, but I'm pretty sure we all were like, we love the physicality of Vildor. We love the depth he provided. And to have somebody like him to be able to step in and the addition of Amik Robertson. Enos Rakestraw. We have a lot of potential guys to fill in there. The linebacking core is where we're still thin. We're hoping to get Trevor back this week. The Lions brought in Anthony Pittman, a guy that has been on this team in the past. More special teams play than linebacker play, but he has done both. He was ahead of Trevor Nowaski on the depth chart last season. Coach, thank goodness we got Jack Campbell in the middle, but we got some supporting pieces that might be able to hold the fort down until Alex Anzalone gets back.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. I think, you go to the last game, we talked about that play where, you got Turner and Eamon out there together, and again, I'm not talking bad about those guys. They're just put in a bad position where if, let's say, Trevor was out there because of so many reps or Anzalone was out there, they would have said, I got him, you take the quarterback. The communication part all comes into play. And here's the other thing too. When the opposing team is on offense, okay, when the opposing team is on offense, how loud is the crowd at Detroit? Okay, so when the Bears are on offense, how quiet will the stadium be?
It won't be quiet. Are you talking about in Chicago?
In Chicago.
Okay.
It won't be loud, right?
Right.
So how much better is the communication for these defensive people in Chicago compared to at home?
Because we saw people bouncing into each other on the defense for the Lions last week.
Yes. And so those are things, of course, I'm looking at it going, man, I'm glad we're going away. The defense is going to be able to talk. They're going to be able to communicate. And the offense don't care how loud you are because they know what each and every one of them's doing. So, It's a benefit for us being on the road for a defense with all the different pieces we have.
All right, James, what did you want to add about that linebacking core?
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, Nowaski could be back this week. That's going to help. That gives them one more guy who's a fairly experienced Sam linebacker. They don't have a lot of guys who play that role really on the roster aside from him. I mean, after losing Barnes, after losing Jalen Reese-Maben, so and even Houston, who was kind of being asked to do that a bit. So Nowaski gives them a little bit more flexibility in that linebacking core with the Sam position, and then those other guys that they've added over the last couple of weeks: Alexander, Turner, Long, Adams, Neiman, all going to have another week of practice underneath them. That communication should be better. Hopefully, the conditions, like Coach said, in Chicago, will be even more conducive to that. But yeah, the linebackers were kind of the weakness last week. But the Bills also have Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid at tight end, who are both very good tight ends. The Bears have Cole Kmet, who's pretty good, and Gerald Everett, who's kind of long in the tooth. I mean, both still a pretty solid tight end, but they're not Kincaid and Knox. So I don't think we'll see them put under the same pressure as they were against the Bills.
All right, and helping with that, hopefully, is the defensive line. Now, we obviously lost Aleem McNeil, but it's not like we don't have some talented guys on that defensive line still. Zadarius Smith and DJ Reader are two guys who were not on our defensive line a year ago. Obviously, we had Hutchinson back then. But even without Hutchinson, we have those two guys that are helping significantly. And then you've got Levi and Pascal back as well, who were banged up before. Coach, do you still see potential with these guys that are in the house and maybe somebody else? I mean, we saw a game out of Pat O'Connor a couple weeks ago that raised some eyebrows, but it feels like there's still enough talent in the building to get the job done.
Well, I think so. I think Levi's had enough reps on the inside, especially in their pass situations, that he can come in there and play that. I think Reader from hearing his quotes after the game, I think he's going to have a game this week. I think he is going to, and I think he, as the veteran leader that he is going to run that defensive line. McNeil's not there, and who better to not have Reed? I don't care if he's only been here a year and he's only started X amount of games, because I think he missed the first 2 or 3. He's still DJ Reader. He's still been in the league forever, and he's going to take that control. And I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things we're going to get out of it, with him. And I feel he'll make that. And then Levi's inside. I think Martin can play. And Connor, I think he's a player, man. I mean, he's my Kaminsky right now, my John Kaminsky, my hard hat freaking pale guy, because we need guys like that, and he'll do the job for us.
And who's your John Kaminsky guy?
It's got to be O'Connor. It's got to
okay,
be.
Yeah, totally. He fits that bill perfectly.
Yeah.
And James, Coach mentioned that draft pick from last year, right? Broderick Martin. What type of role do you see him playing?
I think, this week he's going to have to play some snaps. I don't think he steps in for Aleem. Aleem played a different defensive tackle than Broderick Martin does. He's more of a DJ Reader type. But on early downs, I mean, if you put Reader and Martin in there, who's going to run on that? I mean, you've got two 350-pound behemoths in the middle clogging that up. So you could see them maybe throw both of them out at the same time on first and second down and just say, I dare you to run against this. And then we'll just play everything else with pass coverage and come at you from some different angles. But I mean, they'll obviously mix Levi in there. I think, Levi is more of the Aleem type as far as a defensive tackle who can generate some pass rush. And O'Connor has had some pretty nice games, like Coach said. So if O'Connor can have a game like he did 2 games ago, that's going to be really good. He was kind of invisible last week, but so was pretty much everybody on the defensive line not named Zadarius Smith after Aleem McNeil went out. So, so I think that they've got a good 4 guys to rotate into defensive tackle this week. And It's also against a not nearly as good offensive line as what the Bills had, so they should be able to generate some more pressure and take some pressure off of those linebackers having to cover athletic tight ends for 3-4 seconds.
Well, and like you said, the offense was different. Chicago ranks 25th in points scored in the NFL on offense. The Lions offense, number one, right? But let's switch over to the Lions defense and the Lions offense and the Bears defense. The Lions offense is number one in points per game. The Bears defense is number 11th. So, what are we going to expect out of this matchup here? We obviously think the Lions are going to be a team that's going to be focused on both sides of the ball, all three sides if we add in the specials teams after this loss, Coach. And so I guess let's start with, what do you think we're going to see from the Bears and the way they attack the Lions, and especially considering, the last couple of games?
Well, I think a couple things I wanted to point out. Bears defense has generated the highest pressure rate since their bye week at 40.8% in the NFL. The highest.
That was just this last week?
Yeah, that they're since their bye week, which was
okay.
week 6, I think. So 7 on. So the defense has kind of gone up that. So that's one of the things. But they've only generated 14.8 sacks, which is the second lowest rate. Okay. And last week, Goff had some people in his face, but he used his feet to get out of it and make throws. How many times did he have somebody come bearing down on him and he let one go? That throw to St. Brown, for the I think it was 66-yard touchdown, there's a guy right in his face on that. So I think Goff is going to feel he's going to be the same, if not better. I think our offensive line is going to be a ton better. I mean, we know that.
Well, let me ask you about that right there then. With the Bears getting so much pressure before, the Lions, we'll start with just their pass game, their pass protecting. It seems like Jared Goff has had a lot less time these last couple of weeks, and people are like, why isn't he throwing the ball further downfield? Well, you need to have time to let the play develop to do that, and a lot of the times he did that, he was moving out of the pocket. What do you think's contributing to the change where Goff isn't getting as much time or having as clean of a pocket?
Well, I think if we put a time on it like we did with, I should have looked up what the time was and how much time he's holding the ball before he's releasing it. I think he has more than people think. The other thing too, the downfield throws are dictated by coverage.
Great
the
point.
Downfield throws are dictated by coverage. So you have to, you're not, why are we hitting, we threw that deep one to JMO, I mean, we did, and we may see that a little bit more this week. Here's another fact I found out. Jalen Johnson was on Justin Jefferson on 16 of 40 routes. Jalen Johnson was on Justin Jefferson and was only targeted for once and had an 8-yard reception against them. So Jalen Johnson, which poison is he going to try to take? What is he going to try to take? Well, we move St. Brown around so much and stuff like that. Are they going to throw him on JMO? Or are they going to throw him on St. Brown? And again, that's, those play into our favor in that situation. Some of the coverage and stuff like that, guys, that I looked up, they're still doing 79.9% nickel. Okay. And I think we're going to establish the run. I think after last week, was it 50 yards? And again, we were chasing points. So I think we're going to try to do that. So if they're going to go to that 79.9% nickel, now their middle of field and all that stuff, we talked about that all, the middle of field is open. In other words, cover 2 concept, not that cover 1 or cover 3 where there's a middle safety. That dropped, not substantially, but it's down to 30% now. And so they've tweaked their defense just a little bit, but nothing major than from the first time what we saw them. Maybe a blitz here or roll coverage there. So I think those are all big things. They're still at that 30% with cover 1 and 8.4% cover 2. So
when they run cover 1 or cover 2, what's that going to dictate for us?
That's at middle of the field or the open. So if it's a cover 2, you can go middle of the field because there's not somebody standing there. You'll try to hit it. If they run that cover 3 concept or cover 1 concept with the guy in the middle, we kind of, you kind of look at that pass play that Saint ran where that kind of ran that skinny, kind of a skinny post and go. and they just hit the seam. That's where you get a cover two look, you'll get that a little bit more. So that's why a lot of those deep balls for JMO, when teams are running cover two, it's really hard to throw that ball downfield. Even if it's a man coverage with a cover two over top, because now you got them double covered. But when you get the one or the one and then the threes, you can't do it either because you got all three of those deep zones covered.
Well, and that's where Jared Goff is so good at not forcing it and saying, "Oh, well, I guess I just have to throw it to Tim Patrick." I mean, well, what a consolation prize that is.
Yeah.
Well, Coach, you talked about getting the running game going. I think we're expecting to see Craig Reynolds and Sione Vaki in this game. And I mentioned on our last show, Jermar Jefferson, a former draft pick, is still on the team. He's on the practice squad. It wouldn't shock me to see them elevate him as well. So you got 4 guys still for depth, knowing that Vaki is going to be on special teams and potentially Jermar Jefferson or Craig Reynolds playing some special team stuff. James, what are you looking for out of this running back group? And, they said they'll lean on Gibbs more, but they're not going to overrun him. He still has 100 fewer carries than Saquon Barkley at this point, but they want to manage his workload. So what are you expecting to see out of the running game?
Yeah, I don't think the Lions are going to abandon what they have done all season with, I mean, having Montgomery and Gibbs has been an incredible blessing that they've had, of talent at running back. But I don't think just because Montgomery is out for this game that suddenly Gibbs is going to get 30 carries. I just don't see them doing that to him. I mean, it's not his running style. To just pound the ball, pound the ball, pound the ball. That was David Montgomery. So I think you'll see a combination of Reynolds and Vaki replace a decent chunk of what Montgomery did. I mean, if you saw Vaki in the preseason, he looked pretty good on the carries that they gave him at running back. I mean, he looked like a young version of David Montgomery, with maybe a little bit more explosiveness and some pretty good vision and ability to stop and start in traffic during the preseason. So I'm kind of curious to see what they do with him. The first time they played Chicago, they took advantage of them playing all that nickel, and Montgomery and Gibbs ran all over them. They didn't need to throw the ball a ton because they ran for 170 some yards between them. I think 175. I think it was between the two of them. And Jameson Williams had 18 yards rushing in that game too. So they just pounded that defense with the run, and I think that they'll try to duplicate that at least some in this game, especially if they can early. Just say, hey, we'll run on you and see if you can stop it. They didn't go to the tight ends very much in the first Bears meeting at all. 4 catches between Laporta and Wright for 19 yards because they didn't need it. They just kept pounding between the tackles with those guys.
Yeah, and I agree with you that the running game has been the identity that Dan Campbell has built since he got here, and that's what they want to do. I mean, Coach, I need you to weigh in on this. Last year in the playoffs, on a 4th down play, we saw Craig Reynolds take the ball in for a touchdown. It was out of formation where the Lions had never run out of it, so they were expecting a pass play. But when it's 3rd down and 4th down and short to go, who's the guy the Lions give it to? And when the game's on the line as well, and that could be a separate issue, David Montgomery was the 3rd down, 4th down guy. Is that going to be Gibbs? Will that be Reynolds? You think it might be Jermar Jefferson? Even though he hasn't played a lot, he's been around the team longer than Sione Vaki, who is the rookie. How do you kind of see that playing out? And if the game's on the line, it's probably Gibbs. But those 3rd and 4th short positions, what are you thinking?
Well, I listened to Monty today, Montgomery Scotty, the running back coach. He said he's going to try. He's working to limit Gibbs to 40 reps.
Not 40 rushes, but 40 reps.
40 reps. And so I think, and again, if it comes down to crunch time, I think they're gonna ride that horse, But I think, Reynolds, Jefferson, they keep talking about him. I mean, he brought him up. They thought he had a great preseason. I think he had, Vodka had a great preseason too, and he's more of a hammer guy. So I think really you have 3 guys there that are going to hit a seam when the seam is needed to be hit. And I think those guys, they can count on that. And then if we have to bounce and stuff. And they've used Gibbs a little bit more this year, right? In some critical situations. I think he had a fourth
Yeah.
and one last week, or maybe I don't remember when, but so I think you can't replace Monty like you can't replace any of those other guys, but we got bodies to, strengthen numbers, guys, strengthen numbers. And three guys are better than one, and they're not going to kill Gibbs to get a dub. They're going to use them when they need to use them.
Well, and I don't want to throw too many more stats out here, but looking at rushing yards, did you know Jared Goff is the third leading rusher for the Detroit Lions right now? Like that's crazy. He has 60 yards, okay? Now, J-Mo's got 56, Craig Reynolds got 51. I mean, if I was a betting person, I would say Craig and J-Mo are going to pass Goff before the season ends. But that's just crazy. And, I think Gibbs is the guy you can count on late as well. It will be interesting to see middle of the game, a third and short, a fourth and short, if Gibbs becomes that guy that they put in there, or if they're rotating with somebody else and giving somebody else that specific role that David Montgomery had going. We didn't really touch on the tight ends or the receivers much before we move to special teams. Either you guys want to comment on either of those? Have anything you wanted to bring up?
I mean, we used Laporta a lot we had to throw the ball a ton last week, and I think he broke out of that shell a little bit. I shouldn't say shell, but I think it was nice to really, really open him up, and he may be a big target, or we may be Brock Wright in it this week. But I think you're gonna see those, if they're gonna pack the box, you're gonna see those short passes, and if they go nickel all the time, like 79%, almost 80%, then we're gonna go to the power run game.
And David Montgomery had 36 catches this season.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see Sione Vaki get some small passes because, his game reminds me, and I've heard other people say this as well. I'm not copying them because I thought the same thing. Remember the Theo Riddick out of the backfield? Like when he caught one in the preseason out of the backfield, that made me feel like that. Seeing Sione Vaki with the ball in space is an exciting potential. Different type of guy than Theo Riddick, but that little zip, I guess, James. And so that's a potential there. So any other thoughts on the passing game, James?
Yeah, I think Vaki, if you get him out of the perimeter, has a little bit more potential than Theo Riddick of running somebody over rather than just running around him.
Definitely true. 100% agree with that statement. All right, well then, let's move over to special teams. James, get us started here. What are your thoughts, questions, wonderings about special teams?
The main concern with me is Khalil Dorsey being out. I mean, he was a primary special team guy, and he was one of your returners. One of your kick returners most of the season this year, especially after Khalif went down. Khalif's not going to be back for probably weeks now. I think multiple weeks, if maybe even beginning of the playoffs. But so it's like, who do you have back there returning the kickoffs? You'll probably see Maurice Alexander get called up from the practice squad again, but he's going to run out of elevations here pretty quick. And then the Lions have generally kept two guys back on kick returns. So who's the second one? You could be Jamar Jefferson, who's done that in the past when he's been up on the 53. Outside of that, you'd be pulling in somebody who hasn't really done it a whole lot this season, like St. Brown, or the guys who have asked to do it, like Jamison Williams and Terrion Arnold. And I don't know if you want to suddenly be putting them in a position of doing something that they haven't done at all this season.
If I'm not mistaken, sorry, go ahead, James.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to put guys in that different position right now when you've got games that you need to win to get the number one seed.
That's right. And Tom Kennedy only has one more elevation available if we're going to put him back there. He did do some returns for us early in the season. Coach, Jake Bates missed a long field goal last week. Jack Fox punted well. Any thoughts, any concerns on the special teams? I hear what James is saying about the returns, and I think Dorsey was a gunner as well. And so, as you guys brought up, so there will be some role adjustments there, but what are you expecting or looking for on the special teams aspect of the team?
Well, we got Pittman back, so we know he'll be out there.
Oh, for sure.
Which is a big plus. And I think you'll see some change. I think we're going to see the deep kicks again. They're not going to let the guys return, not going to give us an opportunity because we're using a lot of bodies. We don't need anybody to get banged up in that situation. I still think our hidden yardage, we should win the hidden yardage. We got the better punter and the better kicker. And, those are big things. And, Chicago has a rough time blocking for their field goal unit. So, you may see us come after one if it need be. So, I think those are all things that something's going to happen somewhere, you guys. He's Coach Campbell's in that mood right now. You guys know it. The molded bread, he's going to do something. I just feel it because he's not going to leave any stone unturned in this game. So we may see a fake.
Yep. And you know what, Coach? You're exactly right. If I can borrow a phrase from Wayne's World, it's game on. It's game on, Garth. Because here's what's happening. Major storylines, right? People continue to talk about Campbell and his coaching techniques and his coaching judgment. And I still think a lot of people are getting it wrong. And we heard Campbell on the radio. And, it takes me right back to Rocky Balboa. Okay. And my wife made the mistake of saying, "Yo, Adrian," this morning. And I think I scared half the household when I said, "The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a mean, tough place, and it will knock you to your knees." And I said, it doesn't matter how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And that's how winning is done. And I quoted this about a month ago when we took hits. If there's somebody that will get this team off its knees and to keep going forward, and they'll take a chunk out of your ankle when they get up off their knees, it's this team and it's this coach. And Campbell even said it. I don't care if we win every game by 1 point the rest of the year. I don't care if we give up 700 yards on defense. As long as we win by 1 point, I'm going to be happy. And here's the thing. I think the team and the coach have both evolved in the last 18 months. And I think we're more talented, even with the injuries, than we were at the end of last season. And you've got guys who are ready for that molded bread again because they remember the end of last season, Coach. How are you feeling about the team's ability and about the commentary on Campbell after you? Joe, I want to hear from James as well on this.
I'll go. I think, like I just said, he's getting them back to that. Listen, we're on the bottom, man. We're on the bottom rung now. We're 0-1. Okay, we have to go 1-0 this week, and there he's going to get them there. It goes back to that 1-6 start, correct? It was 1-6, right? And 3 years ago, and we rattled those off. He's circling the wagons. He's getting the posse together. He's getting the gang back together. He's bringing them down. He's going, it's all about us right now, and it has to be about us. And you know what? We love the negativity. We play best when there's negativity out there. We play pretty good when there isn't, but we play really good when there is. And so now it's the shirt's going to come back out. Detroit versus everybody. And here we are, and I'm loving it.
James, that's the mantra, right? As soon as something doesn't go perfect, the criticism people come out flying, and you hear it all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every one of his players heard his radio appearance on Monday, and every one of them is going to be willing to run through a brick wall after that, because he's brought players. Him and Brad Holmes have brought players in here. They fit the mold and they fit the moldy bread. So he's got players on defense that are gonna get the opportunity now that he talked about to show what they can do. And he's got guys that are just willing to run through walls for him. And the Bears are going to be that wall this week.
There we go. And in order to run through that wall, because that's going to be part of the running game, Coach, we talked about the offensive line earlier, and I looked at your scouting report, and you broke it down pretty well here. Most of our offensive line is grading out rather high right now. But Graham Glasgow's number, his PFF number, comes in noticeably lower at 55.9, where, Ragnow and Zeitler and Sewell are in the 80s and Decker's in the mid 70s. Is there something going on different? Obviously, Glasgow went from right guard last year to left guard this year when they brought Zeitler in. But what are you seeing out of this, and is this contributing to some of those issues we've seen on the offensive line?
Well, part of it is I couldn't find the 9 pressures he gave up, or 10, whatever they graded him as. It's the guy comes off him. He's had a couple problems with the loop blitzes where they come around, he seals back down again. But there's 2 or 3 plays in this game that if he had help, Rags or Deck, didn't help him. They kind of went for the double and then they fell off, and all of a sudden the guy made a swim move on him, or made a move. He looked good. His pass, I thought his pass sets were good. Yeah, he's making some mistakes. We all made mistakes last week. I think he's getting, the swim move, he got beat a couple times with that again. One of the biggest plays that I remember, because I remember during the game, it was 5, because I looked it up. Now I know exactly when it was. The second quarter, 5:07 in the second quarter. We were going down to drive. He came around and he just slapped his hands because he was so mad. Well, I went back and watched that play. He tripped on Decker coming around. If he doesn't trip on Decker, Gibbs scores a 25-yard touchdown, guys. He literally tripped. And that's what he was so mad about. He just caught Deck's leg. Deck had to reset. He caught his leg. He was coming around and pulling. And if he gets to the corner, whoever made the tackle, it's a done deal. He's kind of stumbling. He got back out. He's stumbling, trying to get to him, and he couldn't get to him. But he had some great one-on-one blocks and stuff like that. Yeah, we all messed up. But I think one of the things that Campbell and we're talking about is the miscommunication on the offensive line. He was talking about that today or yesterday about, the guy slants here. We didn't realize he was tighter. And Buffalo did a nice job leaving their backers outside of the box and then bringing them in the box right before snap count. And I don't know if we don't have our heads up. I don't know if we don't have a go call and stuff like that. That's, that's above my pay grade. And so I think Glasgow, yeah, I think he's going to play better this week. He had some bad games at the beginning of the year. And then he came back from the PFF grades. Again, I don't, Farley, their line coach is a guy that's grading him, and I'll guarantee you he wasn't graded as bad because of just some of the things. He had some great traps, some great pulls, some he's hand signaling, and they're when he's got an angle block and they're doing tackle on cross, skip pull, whatever you want to call it. There's 4,000 names for it. Pin pull, all that stuff. So you guys, if you sat and watched the game like I have, you would go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And that's what you do as a head coach. Then you get in the meeting room. It never looks as bad after the game when you watch the film. But man, does it look terrible when you're on the film. And so they got a lot to build on and a lot to correct, but we should be good.
Well, I appreciate you breaking that down so people are hearing that number tossed around. Again, there have been some games where numbers have been significantly in one direction or the other, and it doesn't always match what the eye test is showing us. And like you said, you see a couple plays here, a play there, it can drastically change things. And, I'm looking forward to them fine-tuning some of those details so we get more of those wins. All right, James, ref report, what do you got?
Great. I'll keep it kind of short. They got Clete Blakeman again. They had him earlier this season when they were in Green Bay. The good news there is that Detroit got called for 5 penalties. The Packers got called for 10, even though they were at home in that game. So that's good. The other good news is that the Clete Blakeman crew focuses on calling offensive holding and false start. They call that a lot more than they call defensive pass interference and defensive holding. So that's another thing I think that kind of favors the Lions and letting their defensive backs be as handsy as they want to be and be aggressive in coverage. And so I'll pretty much just leave it at that and stay short and sweet.
All right. Before we get out of here with what it's going to take to win and what our predictions are, James, you had the opportunity to go to an event this evening. You got to see author Bill Morris talk about The Lions Finally Roar. Just give us a couple of nuggets of information about the event and what it was like.
Yeah, it was a pretty fun night. And didn't focus maybe as much on the history. I think he wanted people to read the book rather than him to just tell them what was in the book. Uh, so but some of the things that came out, one of the things that I didn't realize about this was that what other big event happened the day that the Fords bought the Detroit Lions?
I know this answer. Coach, do you know?
I have no idea. You guys
It
got
happened
me.
in 1963.
That's the year I was born. That was the big event. I was born that year. Okay, never mind. Thanks for acknowledging that, you guys.
It was
They
the day
walked
that,
out of the meeting. Go ahead, James.
yeah, it was the same day that JFK was assassinated.
Wow. Wow.
Happened on the same day. So even though it was the biggest, the most expensive purchase of a professional franchise, at its time, it was $6 million back in the 1963, which is a lot of millions for the 1960s. It pretty much was relegated to just the sports pages, whereas maybe it might have been a little bit bigger if the president hadn't been assassinated that
Jeez,
day.
oh, man.
So that was pretty interesting. The Lions also, by the way, now are worth $3 billion. So a pretty good investment overall for the Fords. One of the things he said was that his dad worked for Bill Ford Sr.
Yes, he did.
In the marketing department. And one of the things was when he bought the Lions, he offered his dad the job of general manager of the team. And his dad was like, I haven't never done anything like this before. I worked at newspapers before that, and then marketing. And Ford said, "Well, you're a smart guy. You'll figure it out." And I don't think he took the job, but
He
I
didn't.
mean,
He did not. He was like interviewed for it, but he didn't get it. No.
yeah. So, but that was Ford's attitude was, you're a smart guy and you'll figure it out. 40 years later, has the same thing with an interview by a guy named Matt Millen who says, I've never done this and I don't really know what I'm doing. And Ford is still saying, you're a smart guy, you'll figure it out. So that kind of defines the Ford, the Bill Ford Sr., and just that he didn't fully grasp what went into running a football team, whereas Sheila Ford, I think, does. Their first thing was hiring Chris Spielman to spearhead all these other hirings, and the rest has been history. Um, it was
All right, you
also
got another thing for us here?
oh yeah, it was also when Martha Ford gave the team to her daughter Sheila. It was the first time in NFL history that a female had bequeathed the team to another female, which I just thought was just noteworthy. And his talks to some people to write this books, um, he said that what he believes is the reason why Barry Sanders quit is because the Lions got rid of Lomas Brown and Kevin Glover.
Yep.
Not just because of the on the field stuff, but because of off the field, those two had taken him under their wings and were basically family. And then
I've heard Barry say it's
Yeah.
because he wanted to win it with the guys that he was with, and those guys were getting let go. And so it doesn't ever come out that way, but I've gotten that same impression as well, James.
yeah, they brought in Chuck Schmidt to be general manager. He was similar to the other things, did not know how to run a football team and acquire talent. He was a accountant. So he wanted to save money. So he let Lomas Brown and Kevin Glover go. And that led to Barry Sanders eventually losing Barry Sanders. It was also interesting that there was at least one Jared Goff chant during the presentation.
Of course there was. Of course there was. James, thank you for that information. Folks, if you want to hear a little bit more, the interview with Bill Morris I did was in episode 161, just a couple episodes ago. Spoke with him for a good, 10 to 15 minutes. A little more insight there as well. And he's got the book, The Lions Finally Roar. All right, guys, we got to get out of here. But before that, what's it going to take for the Lions to win, Coach, for them to go 1-0?
Keeping Caleb uncomfortable and keeping your foot on the gas, and we'll win by a point.
James, how about you?
Yeah, I think Zadarius Smith and company get some pressure on Caleb Williams. force a few mistakes, and the secondary gets 2 picks.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to kind of put my what will it take and predictions together. You got to get the running game going. That will make it much easier on everything. It'll keep the defense off the field because you will be able to get that time of possession in your favor. I think the secondary's due for an interception. I think one of these safeties wants one. It's been a little while. I would like to see them get at least one takeaway. James, if I hope you're right. I would like you to double up my number. Coach, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Just looking forward and can't wait to get this bad taste out of my mouth.
Hear, hear. James, anything on your end?
Nope.
And folks, we mentioned we'll talk about where things stand, whether the Lions win or lose. Well, the Lions, Vikings, and Eagles are all tied at 12-2. So basically, we just got to keep winning 1 week at a time. The Lions do hold the tiebreakers over each of them. So as long as they keep winning, they get the number 1 seed. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Tell your friends and family about the show. Like and comment on socials. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.
Prescriptions, copays, lab tests. Even with insurance, healthcare can cost thousands every year. But not for me, because I'm enrolled in VA healthcare. My service was then. My benefits are now. Get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov.
Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.